I am Benjamin Foster, 70 years old, and I am currently in the process of dismantling my entire family. A few days ago, I sat in my lawyer's office as my wife Sylvia and my son Patrick realized the trap I had set. Patrick's voice was shaking. You can't do this. This is our home. My wife just stared, her face white with shock. You're a monster, Ben. I simply looked at the legal documents on the table. You planned to have me declared mentally incompetent and steal my entire estate. I'm just taking back what's mine. You said the best thing I could do was disappear. Congratulations. You got your wish. Before I tell you exactly how I uncovered their rotten conspiracy and how I partnered with the most powerful woman in this city to do it, please let me know where you are watching this from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe because you will not believe how this story ends. It all began 4 days ago. 4 days ago, I was still just Ben Foster, the retired fool, the clueless old man. I was in the passenger seat of our Mercedes, the one I paid for. My wife Sylvia was driving her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the highway, as if she willed the traffic to disappear. He needs it, Ben. $100,000. I sighed. It was the 5th time this week, and it was only Tuesday. Sylvia, I said, my voice tired. We already discussed this. The answer is no. Discussed, she snapped. The sound of the turn signal was sharp, angry, matching her tone. You mean you lectured me? You sat in your leather armchair and lectured me like I was a child. I looked out the window at the skyline of the city I helped build. I worked for 45 years, Sylvia. 45 years in construction. I didn't start at the top. I started mixing concrete by hand in the rain. I built my company from mud and sweat and broken contracts. I am not, I repeat, not throwing $100,000 into whatever next-gen tech mirage Patrick is chasing this week. It's not a mirage, she yelled, hitting the steering wheel with the palm of her hand. It's an investment. He explained it to you. It's blockchain logistics. He couldn't even explain the business model, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He used a lot of buzzwords, Sylvia. That's what con artists do. That's not what businessmen do. He's 42 years old. He has an MBA that I paid for. It is long past time he stood on his own 2 feet. That's when she said it. The words that started the avalanche. You're a clueless old man, Ben. Her voice was dripping with contempt. You're just a relic, a fossil. You built buildings with bricks and steel. You don't understand the digital world. This opportunity is moving fast, and you're too slow and too cheap to see it. He needs the money now. Cheap. The word hung in the air of the luxury car. Cheap. I felt the anger rise in my chest, hot and heavy. I paid for the private university that he barely graduated from. I paid the down payment on his first condo in Lincoln Park. I paid for his $300,000 wedding to Jenna, a woman who looks at me like I'm something she scraped off her shoe. I've given him everything, Sylvia. This isn't about money. It's about protecting him and protecting us from his own terrible judgment. Sylvia scoffed, a nasty, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. Protecting your hoarding. You're sitting on your dragon's pile of gold, afraid to let any of it go. What's the point of having all that money if you won't use it to help your only son when he's in trouble? Trouble is exactly what this is, I retorted. This doesn't feel like an opportunity. It feels like desperation. Help is giving him a ladder, Sylvia. What you're describing is giving him a pillow to nap on while he's falling off a cliff. I want to see a business plan. I want to see projections. I want to meet his partners. There's no time, she shrieked, and I saw a bead of sweat on her upper lip. It wasn't just anger. It was panic. The deadline is today. If he doesn't secure the funding today, he loses the whole deal. You're doing this just to spite him, just to control him. I'm doing this. I said, my voice dropping low and firm, the voice I used to use when a foreman tried to lie to me. Because it is my money that I earned, and the answer is no. The car veered suddenly. Sylvia slammed on the brakes, throwing me forward against the seatbelt. We screeched to a halt on the gravel shoulder of the highway. "What in God's name are you doing, Sylvia?" She turned to me, and the look in her eyes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was cold. Empty. "I asked you for help. You said no, so get out." My wife's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. The polite mask she wore for her charity luncheons was gone, replaced by pure, unfiltered rage. "Useless!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "If you won't help your son, you are just as useless as your father was." That was a low blow. My father, Thomas Foster, died with calluses on his hands and dignity in his heart. He never had much, but he was a lion of a man. How dare she? Before I could even respond, she slammed the brakes. The Mercedes fishtailed for a second on the gravel shoulder before lurching to a violent stop. The sudden jolt threw me hard against the seatbelt, knocking the wind out of me. "What in God's name are you doing?" "Sylvia, you'll get us killed." She didn't answer. She just pressed the button to unlock the doors. She turned to me, and her eyes were not angry anymore. They were cold, dead, like two polished stones. "Get out." I, Benjamin Foster, 70 years old, stared at my wife of 46 years. I must have misheard her. "What did you say?" "Get out." She enunciated every syllable. "I am done talking to you. I am done trying to reason with you. If you won't help your family, you are not part of this family." I think I laughed. A short, nervous bark. "You're joking, right? We are on the side of the 294 tollway. This is insane. Stop this." "I am not joking." She reached over me, yanked the handle, and shoved the passenger door open. The roar of semis speeding past at 80 miles an hour filled the car. "Get out, Ben, now!" I was stunned, frozen. This wasn't the woman I married. This was a stranger. She saw me hesitating. With a snarl, she unbuckled her seatbelt, leaned over, and grabbed the small duffel bag at my feet. It was just an overnight bag I kept for emergencies. She threw it out onto the weeds by the roadside. "Sylvia!" I yelled, finally realizing this was real. I scrambled out of the car to grab my bag. The wind whipped at my coat. I turned back. "Sylvia, my wallet, my phone. They're in the center console." She looked at me from the driver's seat. She saw the console. She saw my wallet and my phone right there. She looked back at me, and a small, terrible smile played on her lips. "If you won't give any money, Ben," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the trucks, "then you don't need a wallet." She slammed the passenger door shut. I heard the thunk of the locks engaging. "Sylvia. Don't you dare, Sylvia." She didn't even look at me again. She hit the gas. The tires spat gravel all over my legs as the Mercedes merged back into traffic, disappearing into the midday glare. I stood there. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst. My duffel bag was in my hand. It contained a change of clothes and a toothbrush. I checked my pockets. Empty. Just my keys. No wallet. No phone. No money. I was 70 years old, stranded on the side of an Illinois tollway, completely and utterly alone. I tried to wave down a car. People just sped past. A 70-year-old man on the side of the road looks like trouble. Looks like a vagrant. I must have stood there for 20 minutes. Panic was starting to set in. Real cold panic. How would I get home? How would I even call someone? That's when I saw it. It wasn't just a car. It was an antique. A vintage Bentley, black and polished like a mirror, pulled off the highway and glided to a stop about 10 feet in front of me. The engine was almost silent. The driver's door opened, and a man in a crisp gray chauffeur's uniform stepped out. He was tall, imposing, and looked like he hadn't smiled since 1985. He walked not to me but to the rear passenger door and opened it. He just stood there, holding the door open, waiting. I was confused. Was this for me? I took a hesitant step forward. Then a voice came from the shadowed interior of the car. It was a woman's voice. Old but powerful. The kind of voice that doesn't ask, it commands. "Theodore," the voice snapped. "You're late for your interview. Get in." I froze. My name isn't Theodore. I looked at the driver, Arthur. He was staring at me. His expression was blank. He gestured impatiently at the open door. I had a choice. Stay on the side of the highway, a penniless old man waiting for the state police, or get in the car. I looked down the road where Sylvia had disappeared. I looked at the open door of the Bentley. I'm sorry I was delayed," I said, my voice hoarse. I straightened my coat, picked up my duffel bag, and I, Benjamin Foster, climbed into the back of the stranger's car, pretending to be Theodore. I had no idea I wasn't just getting a ride. I was walking into a reckoning. The heavy door closed with a solid thump, sealing me inside. The silence was absolute. The car didn't rumble like my Mercedes. It glided as if floating on a cushion of air. The smell of old leather and expensive wood polish filled my lungs. I sank into the plush velvet seat, my rough duffel bag looking like a piece of trash on the immaculate floor. The driver, Arthur, got in and the car moved. We accelerated onto the highway, but there was no engine noise, just the whisper of the tires. "You look disheveled, Theodore." The old woman's voice cut through the silence. She was sitting opposite me in a rear-facing seat. She was tiny, swallowed by the size of the car, but her presence filled it. Her hands, gnarled with age but covered in large, heavy rings, rested on the polished head of a cane. Dark glasses covered her eyes. "I trust your personal difficulties will not affect your professional assessment," she continued. I had to think fast. This Theodore was expected. He was late. He was disheveled. "My apologies, madam," I said, trying to make my voice sound professional. "I had a minor roadside incident. A flat tire. It was resolved, and I can assure you it will not be a problem." I caught Arthur's eyes in the rearview mirror. His gaze was sharp, calculating. He stared at me for a solid 3 seconds. He knew. He had to know. He saw me standing on the side of the road, abandoned, not changing a tire. A shiver of fear went up my spine. This was a mistake. This was a terrible, terrible mistake. "A flat tire," the old woman Estelle repeated. Her lips pursed. "How inconvenient. But you are here now. My sources tell me you are the best at assessing structural weaknesses. Tell me, what is your opinion on the new zoning proposals for the West Loop?" I was completely lost. What proposals? Who was Theodore? But then the words structural weaknesses hit me. That I knew. That was the language of my entire life. I leaned forward. "Madame!" I began, letting my real voice, the voice of Benjamin Foster, the builder, take over. "The West Loop proposals are a fantasy built on compromised inspections. They're trying to push through permits for high-density residential on land that was never properly remediated. I've seen the soil reports. I know the contractors they're using. You build higher than 12 stories on that landfill, and you're not building apartments. You're building a tomb. I can smell a bad foundation from a mile away." There was a long silence. Estelle's head was tilted, as if she were listening to a faint sound. Arthur's eyes flicked back to me in the mirror this time, with less suspicion and more curiosity. Estelle nodded slowly. "And what of personnel management? Theodore, how do you handle internal decay? Employees who are not what they seem?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I thought of Patrick. I thought of Sylvia. My voice came out harder than I intended. "Madam, in my experience, internal decay is a cancer. You don't negotiate with it. You don't appease it. You don't hope it gets better. You cut it out, cleanly, and without hesitation. I leaned in my anger at my own family fueling this lie. You find the weakness, you find the rot. You expose it to the light, and you remove it before it brings the whole house down. You don't spare it because it was part of the original structure. You save the structure from it. Another long silence. Estelle's fingers tapped on the head of her cane. 1, 2, 3. A harsh philosophy, Theodore, she said, her voice neutral. It's the only philosophy that keeps the building standing, madam, I replied. Arthur's eyes met mine in the mirror again. This time the skepticism was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling intensity. He knew I wasn't Theodore, but he seemed fascinated by who I actually was. The Bentley slowed, turning off the main road onto a private drive. Massive wrought iron gates, the kind I used to fabricate for clients in Lake Forest, swung open silently to let us pass. We were approaching a mansion that looked more like a European palace than a home. I had survived the conversation. I had used my own truth to build a convincing lie. But as the house loomed larger, I had no idea if I had just passed the test or walked straight into a much more dangerous trap. The Bentley rolled to a stop on a driveway made of ancient cobblestones. The mansion was even larger up close, a fortress of limestone and dark slate that seemed to stare down at me. Arthur got out, walked to my door, and opened it. He didn't offer a hand. He just waited. "Come, Theodore," Estelle's voice commanded from inside. "We are late." I stepped out my old duffel bag, feeling even more pathetic in this setting. Arthur led the way up a grand staircase, his back as stiff as a steel rod. He didn't speak. The heavy oak doors opened silently as we approached, as if by magic, probably operated by some unseen security. The inside wasn't a home. It was a museum. The floors were black and white marble. A chandelier the size of my old pickup truck hung 3 stories above us. I followed Arthur across the cavernous hall, our footsteps echoing in the silence. He stopped at a set of tall mahogany doors and knocked once. "Enter," Estelle's voice called from within. Arthur opened the doors and gestured for me to go inside. The room was dark, the heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. The only light came from a green-shaded lamp on a massive desk that sat in the center of the room. Estelle Wallace was sitting behind it, perfectly still, her hands still resting on her cane. "Wait here," Arthur instructed, his voice a low rumble. He walked to the desk, leaned down, and whispered something to her. I couldn't hear what he said. Estelle nodded once, a sharp, bird-like motion. "Arthur, you may leave us," she said. The tall chauffeur turned and walked past me. He stopped at the door for a brief second and looked at me. His expression was completely unreadable. Then he left, closing the heavy doors with a soft, final click. I was alone, in the dark, with a blind 90-year-old woman who held all the power. The silence stretched. I could hear the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I cleared my throat, about to speak, about to continue the charade of being Theodore. "And Benjamin Foster," she said, her voice cutting through the gloom. "You can stop pretending." My blood turned to ice, my heart stopped. I couldn't have heard her right. I must have. I beg your pardon, madam. Your name is Benjamin Foster. You are 70 years old. You live in Naperville. Your wife Sylvia kicked you out of her Mercedes on the side of the 294 tollway approximately 45 minutes ago. You are not Theodore. Theodore is a 60-year-old analyst from Wisconsin who is at this moment receiving my apologies and a very generous check for his inconvenience. Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Foster? I physically stumbled back as if she had pushed me. My duffel bag slipped from my nerveless fingers and hit the Persian rug with a soft thud. How do you know that the car, Arthur? Were you following me? She laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was dry, like rustling leaves. Following you, don't flatter yourself. I have better things to do than follow around the spoiled son of a great man. Arthur, she said, tapping her cane on the floor, is loyal. He saw you on the side of the road. He recognized the Mercedes. He recognized her driving away. And he recognized you from the files. Files? What files? The files I've kept on every major construction family in this city for the last 60 years. But the files weren't necessary. I knew who you were the moment you opened your mouth. This was impossible. I was just a rideshare driver in her app. No, I wasn't. I wasn't Theodore. She had known from the beginning. The Theodore name was a test, a trap. How? I whispered, my voice barely working. How could you possibly know me? Estelle Wallace leaned forward, and the lamplight caught the hard line of her jaw. I may be blind, Mr. Foster, but I am not deaf, and my memory is perfect. I would know that voice anywhere, even after 50 years. 50 years, I've never met you in my life. No, you haven't, she said, but your father did. I was in a contentious bid meeting in 1973. Your father, Thomas Foster, was there. He was my biggest rival, the only honest builder in this entire God-forsaken city. A young, arrogant city councilman tried to shut him down to insult him publicly. And your father stood up and spoke. He had a voice like yours, not in its sound but in its weight, a voice that knew how to build things and how to tear them down. I recognized that same structural integrity in your voice the second you started lying about soil reports. She paused and her head tilted again, lost in a memory I couldn't see. Your father, Thomas, he was the greatest man I ever knew, and I hated him for it. He beat me on the McCormick Place contract. He beat me on the library contract. Not because he was richer, he wasn't, but because he was better. He was honest. He was a lion. She leaned back into the shadows. I've watched his legacy. I watched his lion son. You grow up and turn into a house cat. I watched you hand your company, your father's legacy, over to your worthless son, Patrick. I watched you let your greedy wife, Sylvia, lead you around by the nose. Thomas Foster would be ashamed of you. I felt the blood drain from my face. This strange, blind old woman knew everything. Not just my name. She knew my family. She knew my weakness. Why? I managed to say. Why pick me up? Why bring me here? Just to tell me this. Because, she said, her voice dropping. I also saw Sylvia and Patrick at my bank last week, Benjamin. They were in a private meeting with the high-risk accounts manager. And I can tell you something you don't know. She leaned forward one last time, her voice a low, dangerous whisper that chilled me to the bone. They didn't look like investors. They looked like prey. They looked terrified. Sylvia didn't kick you out of that car because you refused to give her $100,000. She kicked you out because she is desperate. And whatever they are planning, it's much, much worse than you think. I stumbled back, my mind a whirlwind. Worse. What are you talking about? What files? This is insane. You don't know my family. I know men. Estelle's voice was sharp as glass. And I know your father. Thomas Foster was a lion. He built his half of this city on grit and his word. He never backed down from a fight. He certainly never let anyone disrespect him. She paused, and I could feel her blind gaze piercing right through me. I watched you, Benjamin. I watched you inherit that grit and let it turn to mush. You handed your company, your father's legacy, to that worthless boy of yours on a silver platter. You let your wife turn you into her personal bank. You are not a lion. You are a doormat. And you just got kicked out of your own car. The shame hit me harder than the cold wind on the highway. She was right. I had spent my life trying to give my family everything, trying to be the nice father, the provider. And in doing so, I had forgotten to be the man my own father raised me to be. I don't understand, I stammered, sinking into the leather chair opposite her desk. Patrick, he just needs money for an investment. Sylvia is just angry. Angry? Estelle laughed again, that dry, unsettling sound. Do you think that was anger in her face when Arthur saw her speed away? That was panic. Benjamin, I was at my bank last week. The main branch downtown. Who do I see in the private wealth management section being escorted by security? Your wife. And your son. I felt my stomach tighten. They bank there. So what? They weren't meeting with a teller, you fool, she snapped. They were in a glass conference room with Bill Jensen. Jensen isn't a financial planner. He's the vice president of high-risk accounts. He's the man the bank sends when a client is about to default on $500,000. He's the man they send in to liquidate assets before the feds get involved. No, I whispered. That's not possible. Patrick wouldn't. You're a builder, Benjamin. Use your head. They looked desperate. They looked like desperate gamblers who had just bet the house and lost. Your refusal of the $100,000 wasn't the reason for this. It was just the inconvenience that got in their way. She leaned forward, her voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear it. Let me be perfectly clear, because you seem to be a very slow man. Sylvia did not kick you out of that car to punish you. She kicked you out because she needed you gone. She needed you with no phone, no money, and no way to interfere with whatever she and Patrick had to do today. She needed you to disappear. The words hit me. Today. The deadline Patrick mentioned. They weren't trying to get money from me. They were trying to stop me from seeing what they were already doing. I looked down at my hands. My old calloused hands. I had nothing. No phone. No wallet. I was trapped. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Of course you don't. You're still in shock. First, you will stop looking like a vagrant. Arthur will escort you to the Cypress Club. It's my private hotel. You will have a suite. You will eat. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small, slim box. And you will use this. It is a new phone. Clean, encrypted. The only numbers in it are mine, Arthur's, and my personal lawyer, Mr. Thorne. Your family does not know this number exists. Why? I asked, my voice raw. Why are you doing this? You said my father was your rival. Estelle's face softened for just a second. Your father respected me, and I respected him. What your wife and son are doing, it is a stain on his legacy. I will not stand by and watch Thomas Foster's memory be destroyed by a pair of greedy, pathetic amateurs. Now take the phone, Benjamin. Your war has just begun. The Cypress Club was not a hotel. It was a tomb of old money and silence. Arthur escorted me to a suite that was larger than the entire first floor of my house. It was all dark wood brass fixtures and heavy velvet curtains. He placed my duffel bag on a luggage rack where it looked like a stray dog that had wandered into a palace. Mrs. Wallace has instructed that all your meals and incidentals be billed to her account. The phone is on the desk. It is fully charged. He looked at me for a moment, that same unreadable expression. Good luck, Mr. Foster. Then he left. I stood alone in the enormous room. I walked over to the desk and picked up the phone Estelle had given me. It was sleek black and felt cold in my hand. I turned it on. The screen lit up. 3 contacts, Arthur Estelle Thorne. That was it. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, the mattress so firm it felt like a marble slab. Estelle's words echoed in the quiet room. They looked like desperate gamblers. She needed you gone. It was like a key turning in a rusty lock. Suddenly, the last 6 months of my life began to replay in my mind, but this time every small, strange event looked different, darker. I remembered about 3 weeks ago I came into the kitchen late at night for a glass of water. Sylvia and Patrick were huddled over the kitchen island, their voices low and urgent. The second I stepped into the room, they both flinched, and Sylvia immediately flipped her phone face down on the counter. Dad, Patrick said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. You're up late. Just going over some family finances with Mom. Sylvia was just staring at me, her face pale. Go back to bed, Ben, she'd said, forcing a smile. We're almost done. Don't worry your head about it. I'd felt a prickle of annoyance then. My finances, and I'm told not to worry my head. But I was tired. I let it go. I went back to bed. Now I saw it for what it was. Not a private talk. A conspiracy. Then I thought of Jenna, my daughter-in-law. 2 months ago at Sunday dinner she had been complaining. Patrick worked so hard, she'd said, but they were barely scraping by. This economy, Ben, she'd sighed. We're having to tighten our belts. I had to cancel our trip to Aspen. I remembered thinking it was odd. Patrick held a senior position at a major financial firm. His salary was easily over $300,000 a year. What kind of tightening the belts forces you to cancel a ski trip? I thought she was just being dramatic, fishing for a handout. But now, high-risk accounts. Default. Were they scraping by because Patrick was pouring their money into a black hole? And then the big one. The one that made me feel sick to my stomach. About 4 months ago, Sylvia had come to me with a stack of papers. It was just after my 70th birthday. Ben, darling, she'd said, sitting beside me on the sofa, her hand on my knee. We need to simplify things. For the kids. We should liquidate some of the real estate holdings, the ones you own outright, and move that money into a more flexible trust. Just, for estate planning. It was the plausible lie. The perfect explanation. I had looked at the papers. It meant selling 3 commercial properties I had built in the 80s. Properties that were my foundation. I don't know, Sylvia, I'd said. They're solid assets. They generate steady income. Why sell? She got frustrated. Oh, Ben, you're so sentimental. They're just bricks and mortar. It's too complicated for Patrick to manage if something happens to us. This is cleaner. Please just sign. I refused. I told her I would talk to my lawyer, not hers, when I was ready. She'd been furious. She didn't speak to me for a week. At the time, I thought it was just a normal disagreement about money. But now I saw it. It wasn't estate planning. It was a cash grab. She wasn't trying to plan for my death. She was trying to steal my life's work while I was still alive. I stood up from the bed, my hands shaking. Estelle was right. This wasn't about $100,000. This was about everything. And they had been planning it for months. I grabbed the new phone. I had to know. I had to know what they were doing right now. I called Sylvia's number. I stared at the name, Sylvia, on the pristine screen of the new phone. My thumb hovered over the call button. My heart was pounding. What if she answered? What would I say? I pressed the screen. It rang once, twice, then click. Her voice filled my ear, but it was the recording. You've reached Sylvia. I'm dreadfully busy at the moment. Please leave a message and I'll return your call when I can. Dreadfully busy. Busy doing what? Busy stealing my money. Busy with Bill Jensen, the high-risk manager. I hung up without leaving a message. My hand was shaking. Okay, fine. I'll call my son, Patrick. He's my son. He couldn't. I dialed his number from memory. I didn't even need to look it up. It rang, and rang, and rang. Straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Patrick. You know what to do. Leave it at the beep. He sounded so cheerful, so carefree, like the successful, happy son I had always wanted to believe he was. The son I had paid for. A cold dread was settling deep in my gut. Estelle was right. They needed me gone. This wasn't a random argument. This was a coordinated plan. They were both deliberately unavailable. But they forgot one person. Jenna, my daughter-in-law. The one who complained about tightening her belt. If Patrick was in financial trouble, she would be panicking. And panicking people make mistakes. I found her number. I pressed call. It picked up on the very first ring so fast she must have had the phone in her hand. "Hello," she answered, her voice breathless and sharp. "Jenna, it's Ben, it's Dad." The silence on the other end was deafening. I heard a sharp intake of breath, a muffled sound, like she had covered the receiver with her hand and was whispering frantically to someone in the room with her. "It's him, it's the old man." I heard it clearly. The old man, not Dad. She came back on the line, her voice suddenly a high-pitched performance of fake panic. "Dad, oh my God, Dad, where are you? Are you okay? We've been worried sick. Mom and Patrick are out looking for you right now." Mom was beside herself. "She said you two had a little argument and you just walked off." The lies. They came so easily, so smoothly. Worried sick, out looking for me. My real phone, the one sitting in the Mercedes, must have been blowing up with their worried calls, right? I decided to play along. I had to know more. I'm fine, Jenna," I said, putting a tremor in my voice. I made myself sound old, confused, and tired. "I'm so sorry, I just got confused. I'm at an old friend's house. Frank's. Frank Peterson. I took a cab. I used the name of a friend who had been dead for 10 years. If she was smart, she'd know I was lying. But she wasn't smart. She was desperate. Frank's. Oh, thank God. Thank God you're safe," she gushed. The relief in her voice was real, but it wasn't relief that I was safe. It was relief that she knew where I was. That's wonderful, Dad. Listen, you stay right there. Don't move. I'm going to call Mom and Patrick right now and tell them. They'll be so relieved. They'll probably come right over to get you. What's Frank's address?" There it was, the hook. "Oh," I said, pretending to be flustered. No, dear. Don't you worry. I'm just going to rest here tonight. I'm so embarrassed. I caused such a fuss. You just tell Sylvia I'm safe. Tell her I'll call her tomorrow. I just need to sleep." Another pause. More muffled whispering. She was clearly not alone. "Oh, okay, Dad. If you're sure..." She sounded uncertain now. My response hadn't fit her script. "Yes, dear. I'm sure. I'm just so tired. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll talk to you all tomorrow." Okay, Dad. Just, you rest. We're just so glad you're okay." She hung up so fast I was left listening to the dial tone. I lowered the phone. My hands were perfectly steady now. The tremor was gone. The cold dread had been replaced by a cold, hard certainty. Jenna's lies were pathetic. Worried sick. But they didn't answer my calls. Out looking for me, but Sylvia's phone was off. And the biggest lie of all, Mom was beside herself. I knew my wife. If Sylvia had truly felt guilty after our fight, if she thought I was a 70-year-old man wandering around lost, she wouldn't be out looking. She would have called the police. She would have called the hospitals. She would have called everyone. But she hadn't. Because she knew exactly where I was. She knew I was on the side of the 294 tollway. She knew I had no phone and no money. She hadn't called the police because she was relying on me being helpless. She was relying on me being gone. My disappearance wasn't a problem for their plan. It was part of their plan. I looked at the third name on my new phone. Thorne, Estelle's lawyer. I pressed the call button. It was time to stop being the victim. It was time to find out what my family was really doing. "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice low and steady. "This is Benjamin Foster. I need your help. I believe my wife and son are actively trying to steal my assets. And I need to know what they're doing, right now. I hung up the phone with Jenna, the click of the disconnect sounding like a gunshot in the silent, opulent room. The fake, high-pitched panic in her voice. "We've been worried sick." It was disgusting. They weren't worried. They were managing me. They thought I was a confused old man, lost and scared, waiting to be rescued. They didn't realize that by throwing me out of that car, Sylvia had done something she would regret. She had finally made me open my eyes. My hands were steady now. The adrenaline was a cold, clean fire. I looked at the third name on the phone. Thorne. I pressed the button. A man answered immediately, his voice crisp and professional. "Thorne?" "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice low and clear. "My name is Benjamin Foster. Mrs. Wallace introduced us. By proxy. I am calling from the phone she provided." "Mr. Foster." His voice didn't register surprise. He was clearly expecting my call. "Estelle briefed me. I am at your disposal. What is your immediate need?" I didn't waste time. "I need you to freeze every joint asset I share with my wife, Sylvia Foster. Checking savings, brokerage accounts, lines of credit. Everything. Immediately. I have reason to believe she and my son Patrick are actively attempting fraudulent withdrawals as we speak." "Understood," Thorne said. There was no hesitation. "I have your signed authorization from Mrs. Wallace's files. I will execute the freeze on all known accounts immediately. I will also flag your credit bureaus against any new lines of credit being opened in your name. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said, thinking of Estelle's warning about the bank. My wife and son were seen at the main branch speaking with Bill Jensen in high-risk accounts. I need to know why. I need to know what they've already done. "I know Jensen," Thorne replied. His voice was grim. "I'll make the call. Sit tight, Mr. Foster. I will call you back on this device within the hour." The line went dead. 1 hour. I stood up and walked to the window of the suite. The view was of a manicured garden. It was peaceful. Fake. My whole life had been like this garden. Perfect on the surface, but maintained by lies I'd chosen not to see. I paced the room. I thought about the $100,000. It was such a specific number. Why demand that in a fight if they were already planning something bigger? Was it a test to see if I was paying attention? Or was it a distraction? A red herring to make me focus on a small fire while they set the whole house ablaze. I thought of Sylvia. 46 years. Had it all been a lie? No. I couldn't believe that. The early years, the struggle raising the kids, building the business. That was real. But the woman she had become, the woman who looked at me with those cold, dead eyes and told me I didn't need a wallet, that woman was a stranger. She had been corrupted by Patrick, by his greed, by his weakness. Or had she corrupted him? The silence of the room was oppressive. I looked at my duffel bag. My old life. It was pathetic. Estelle was right. I had become a doormat. I had let them walk all over me for the sake of peace. I had mistaken my weakness for kindness. My father Thomas would have never let this happen. He would have seen the rot in the foundation years ago and ripped it out. He wouldn't have painted over it and pretended it wasn't there. The new phone vibrated on the desk, the sound startling me. I lunged for it. It was Thorne. It had only been 50 minutes. "Mr. Thorne." I answered, my throat dry. "Benjamin," he said, and the shift from Mr. Foster to my first name told me we were now in a different territory. "You were right to call, and you were just in time." I sat down. "What did you find?" "I contacted the bank's fraud department with your authorization," Thorne said, his voice clipped all business. "At 10:45 this morning, approximately 10 minutes after Sylvia abandoned you on the highway, a wire transfer request was initiated from your joint brokerage account." My blood ran cold. "How much?" $250,000, Thorne said. I couldn't breathe. The 100,000. It was a distraction. They initiated the transfer, Thorne continued, to a newly formed LLC, PF Holdings. I'm running a check on it now, but I'd bet my license it traces back to your son, Patrick. I thought about Jenna's fake panic. We're worried sick. They weren't worried. They were at a computer logged into my account, trying to steal $250,000. They needed me lost and confused so I wouldn't see the transfer alert on my real phone. Did it go through? I whispered. No, Thorne said, and I heard the satisfaction in his voice. My call to the fraud department came in while the transfer was still pending its final review. It was flagged and frozen along with every other asset you share. They missed their window, Benjamin. They missed it by about 30 minutes. I leaned back, a wave of adrenaline making me dizzy. We had stopped them. But there's more, Thorne said, his voice turning grim again. The bank was already on high alert. The reason Sylvia and Patrick were meeting with Bill Jensen last week. It wasn't about a default. Not exactly. It was about leverage. Patrick's personal finances are a disaster. He's underwater. It seems they were trying to negotiate a new massive loan, using your entire commercial real estate portfolio as collateral. I hung up the phone. I stood in the silence of that massive suite, but my mind was no longer quiet. It was racing. Thorne's words echoed, using your entire portfolio as collateral. This wasn't a sudden angry impulse. This wasn't Sylvia having a bad day. This was a premeditated attack. This was a siege. The argument in the car, her screaming at me, kicking me out. It was all a distraction. It was a calculated move designed to get me off the board, to make me vanish for the crucial hours they needed to liquidate my life. I looked at my hands, the hands that had built that portfolio, the hands that had signed the blueprints and poured the concrete. Estelle was right. I had become a doormat. But even a doormat, when you shake it hard enough, remembers it was made for stomping on. I grabbed the phone and dialed Thorne back. I'm in the Cypress Club. Where are you? My office is 5 blocks away, he said. We need a war room, I said. Now, bring everything you have on my family. And tell Mrs. Wallace I'm on my way. No need, Benjamin, Thorne's voice replied, closer now. We're already here. Mrs. Wallace is waiting for you in the library, downstairs. Of course she was. She was always 10 steps ahead. The library at the Cypress Club was a room from another century. Dark mahogany shelves stretched up to a ceiling painted with constellations. The air smelled of leather and old paper. Estelle was sitting by a cold fireplace, a cup of tea steaming on the table beside her. Thorne stood near the window, a thin briefcase in his hand. You look better, Estelle said as I walked in. Anger suits you. It's the foster blood finally waking up. Sit down. I ignored the chair and walked to the fireplace. They tried to leverage my real estate, my entire portfolio, while I was sitting on the highway. I told you, Estelle said simply. Desperate prey. Thorne stepped forward, opening his briefcase. Benjamin, the freeze is in place. For now, your assets are secure. But this is only the first move. The freeze is temporary, as your wife Sylvia has spousal rights. She can and she will challenge this in court. She will claim you are unstable, erratic. Her abandoning you will be twisted to look like you storming off in a senile rage. So she was right, I said, the thought sickening me. When she called me a clueless old man, she was already building her case. Precisely, Thorne said. We cannot just defend. We must attack. We need to prove intent to defraud. We need to know why. What is this black hole they are pouring money into? I told them about the remembered conversations. Patrick and Sylvia whispering in the kitchen. Jenna complaining about being broke. The failed attempt to get me to liquidate my properties 4 months ago. Thorne was pacing slowly. It all fits. They tried to get the assets legally through the estate planning lie. You refused, so they moved to Plan B. They went to the bank, tried to leverage the portfolio. Jensen must have told them they needed your signature or proof that you were incapable of giving it. My blood ran cold. The high-risk manager, Jensen, he was helping them. Likely, Thorne said. But that's a fight for later. Right now, something else doesn't add up. I looked at him. What seems pretty clear? They're broke, they're stealing. No, Thorne said, stopping his pacing. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. This is the question that's bothering me. Why the fight in the car and why the demand for $100,000 cash from you? I was confused. What do you mean they were desperate for money? But they were already moving on the $250,000 wire transfer, Thorne insisted. They were already trying to leverage your millions in real estate. If you have a plan to steal $1 million, why risk everything by starting a screaming match over $100,000? It's sloppy. It doesn't fit. He was right. If they were already trying to drain my accounts, why pick that specific petty fight? I tried to think. Maybe the $100,000 was for Patrick himself. Pocket money while Sylvia handled the bigger transfer. No. Estelle's voice cut in. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. Mr. Thorne is right. The two amounts are for two different things. We both looked at her. She tapped her cane on the floor. The $250,000 wire transfer. That was for them. That was Sylvia's payday. The real estate leverage. That was for the high-risk account. That was for the bank. But $100,000 in cash. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Cash is untraceable. Cash is anonymous. Cash is for people who do not and cannot use banks. Thorne's face went pale. My God, you think he's in debt to someone else, someone dangerous? A loan shark, I whispered. Patrick. My son. Estelle turned her blind gaze toward me. The bank is a problem they can negotiate with. But this other debt, the $100,000 in cash, that is the one that has them terrified. That is the one that required them to get you out of the way today, no matter the cost. He isn't just in trouble with a bank, Benjamin. He's in trouble with criminals. Thorne snapped his briefcase shut. I'm hiring a private investigator. Now. We need eyes on Patrick. We need to know who he's meeting. And we need to dig into his personal finances, not just yours. We are no longer just protecting your money. We may be protecting your life. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I stayed in the suite at the Cypress Club. I ordered room service, steak eggs, real coffee, food I could barely taste. I was a prisoner in a velvet cage waiting. I had no phone to call my real friends, no wallet. I was completely dependent on Estelle and her team. I was for the first time truly powerless, just as Sylvia had intended. But the anger was keeping me sharp. The anger was a shield. Thorne had told me to sit tight while his team worked. He had forensic accountants, legal aides, a small army I never knew existed. He was, as Estelle had put it, a lion tamer, and my family were the rogue animals. The phone rang late the next afternoon. It was Thorne. His voice was clipped. Benjamin, I have the first report from my accountants. I sat at the heavy mahogany desk pen in hand, ready to take notes on the club's thick stationery. Go ahead. First, he said, the small fires. We ran a full credit check on you going back 5 years. Your wife, Sylvia, has not been idle. What do you mean? I mean separate from your joint accounts, she has opened 3 high-limit credit cards in your name. An Amex Platinum, a Visa Signature, and a Chase Sapphire Reserve. She used your social security number, which she obviously has, and listed her own mailing address, a P.O. box, as the billing address. You never saw the statements. I felt a wave of nausea. How much? As of this morning, Thorne said, and I could hear him turn a page. The combined outstanding balance on those 3 cards is $84,622.40. $84,000 in secret credit card debt. I thought of all the times in the last year Sylvia had claimed she was cutting back, all the times she said she was shopping at discount stores. It was all a lie. She was funding her lifestyle by stealing my identity. The purchases, Benjamin Thorne continued, are what you'd expect. Spas, designer handbags, luncheons at the peninsula. She was systematically bleeding you dry on a micro level even while planning the macro theft. I closed my eyes. The woman who had slept next to me for 46 years. A common thief. Okay, I said, my voice hard. Okay, what about Patrick? There was a pause. That is more complicated, Thorne said. On the surface, his firm, Patrick Foster Wealth Solutions. The name alone was a slap in the face. Foster. Using my name. My father's name. It looks legitimate, Thorne went on. It's a registered LLC. He has a nice office downtown, a polished website, real clients. We ran background checks on his top 10 clients. They are for the most part legitimate local business owners, retirees. It all looks clean. But what? I said. I could hear the but in his voice. You found something. I found what isn't there, Thorne said. His declared income, his firm's revenue. It's substantial. Just as you thought, well over $300,000 a year. His lifestyle, while expensive, should be manageable. That house in Lincoln Park, the cars, the clubs, it's a stretch, but it's not impossible. It doesn't explain the panic. It doesn't explain the $84,000 in secret debt from your wife. It doesn't explain the high-risk meeting with Jensen. And it definitely doesn't explain the need for $100,000 in cash. I gripped the pen. So where is the money going, Thorne? If he's making it, where is it going? That's what my team has been digging into for the last 12 hours, Thorne said. We've been looking at his personal accounts, mortgage payments, car payments, all normal. But then we found the other transfers, the ones that don't make sense. Go on. Weekly transfers, Benjamin, large ones. $10,000 here, $20,000 there, every week like clockwork. They aren't going to a bank. They aren't going to a brokerage. They're going to a series of offshore accounts. Accounts registered to online casinos based in Malta and Curacao. He's not just in debt. He's a gambler. A heavy one. The pieces clicked into place. The investment. The tech startup. It was all a lie. But even that's not the worst of it, Thorne said, his voice grim. It's not just the casinos. We found another set of payments, even bigger, $50,000, last month, to a holding company we've never heard of. It has no website, no public records. It's a ghost. A loan shark, I whispered. Exactly, Thorne said. He's not just gambling. He's lost. He's lost big. And he's in debt to someone far more dangerous than a bank. The $100,000 in cash, it wasn't for an investment. It was a payment. A payment he clearly missed. I hung up the phone. The pen in my hand had snapped in two. I was staring at the ink bleeding onto the expensive hotel stationery. Loan shark. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I took to baseball games. My Patrick. He was in debt to criminals. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair, the lights of the city blurring through the window. The steak I'd eaten earlier felt like poison in my stomach. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patrick's face, not as a 42-year-old man, but as a 6-year-old boy smiling at me, holding up a drawing. Look, Daddy, I made this for you. Where did I go wrong? When did this rot start? Was it me? Did I give him too much? Did I make life so easy for him that he never learned how to fail, how to be a man? The questions circled in my head, a vulture's carousel, and I had no answers. The phone rang again the next morning. It was Thorne. His voice was different. The professional clip was gone. He sounded tired, grave. "Benjamin," he said, "I have to advise you to sit down." I was already sitting. "What is it now?" "More gambling debts." "I wish it were that simple," Thorne said. I'm deeply sorry. It's worse." "Just tell me, son. I'm past the point of being shocked." "No," Thorne said softly. "I don't think you are. I pulled in a favor, Benjamin. A big one. I have a contact, a senior partner at the firm where Patrick works. I called him last night. I gave him a hypothetical. A wealthy client's son, erratic behavior, massive offshore transfers. My contact, he didn't need a hypothetical. He knew the name Patrick Foster instantly." I gripped the armrests of the chair. "What did he say, Patrick?" "He's not just a gambler, Benjamin. He's a thief. He hasn't just been losing his own money. He's been losing his client's money." My breath hitched. "What note? He's been under a secret internal investigation for the last 2 months, Benjamin. He's been caught, red-handed, embezzling." The word. Embezzlement. It was a legal term, a criminal term. It wasn't something that applied to my family. "How?" I whispered. "My source says Patrick was clever. He created ghost client profiles. He fabricated statements. He took money from his older, less attentive clients, retirees mostly, and funneled it into these ghost accounts. From there, he wired the money to his offshore gambling sites." "Oh God," I said, putting my head in my hands. "How much?" "The internal audit is still ongoing," Thorne said. "But my source, he says the whole they've found so far is just over $5 million. $5 million. I couldn't speak. My mind just shut down. 5 million. Thorne continued, his voice filling the void. "This is the real story, Benjamin. This is the black hole. The gambling wasn't the problem. It was the symptom. He was trying to win back the money he'd stolen. But he just kept digging the hole deeper. The loan shark. The 100,000 in cash. That was probably just interest. A payment to keep someone quiet, someone who found out. It all made sense. The desperation, the panic. Jenna tightening her belt while her husband was setting $5 million on fire. The meeting with Jensen at the bank. I said, my voice hoarse. The leverage on my properties. It wasn't to get money. It was to replace it. Exactly, Thorne said. He was trying to get a massive multi-million-dollar loan against your real estate. Not for an investment. Not to pay a loan shark. He was trying to pay back the $5 million he stole before the firm's investigation went public. He was trying to cover his tracks. He was trying to avoid prison. I felt a cold, terrible clarity. And the firm? When is the investigation? That's the final piece, Benjamin, Thorne said. That's why Sylvia kicked you out of the car yesterday. That's why they needed you gone. My source confirmed it. The internal investigation is over. They are scheduled to present their findings to the board of directors and the SEC in 5 days. 5 days. They had 5 days to find $5 million. My refusal to give them the 100,000. It wasn't just a bump. It was the final straw. They were out of time, and I was their last and only source of money. They weren't just trying to steal from me. They were trying to use my entire life's work as a get-out-of-jail-free card, and they were willing to destroy me, to abandon me on a highway to do it. Thorne, I said, my voice shaking, but not with fear, with something else, a cold, hard rage. I need to see my wife. I need to see my son. Benjamin, I don't think that's wise. No, I said. I'm not going to confront them, not yet. I'm going to set a trap. I'm going to find out just how deep this rot really goes. The phone in my suite buzzed the next morning. It was not a call. It was a message from Thorne. It contained a link to a secure video file and a simple 4-word message. You need to see this. I tapped the screen. The video was clearly filmed from a vehicle slightly shaky looking across a busy city street. The timestamp in the corner showed it was from 30 minutes ago. I saw Sylvia's Mercedes pull up and park aggressively half on the curb. She got out of the driver's side. She looked terrible. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was messy. She wore oversized sunglasses not as a fashion statement, but as a mask. Then my daughter-in-law Jenna got out of the passenger side. She was carrying a large, heavy-looking designer handbag. Her handbag. The one I paid for years ago as a welcome to the family gift. They both looked around the street, furtive, paranoid. They looked like common criminals casing a joint. Then they hurried inside a building. The sign above the door was discreet gold lettering on black glass. Gold Coast collateral and fine jewels. It was a pawn shop. A high-end one, but a pawn shop nonetheless. The investigator, Harris, must have followed them inside because the camera angle changed. Now it was inside the shop, filmed from his lapel, looking over their shoulders at the glass counter. I watched my wife and my daughter-in-law. Jenna unzipped the heavy bag and began to empty it. It wasn't just her jewelry. It was Sylvia's. The diamond necklace I gave Sylvia for our 40th anniversary. Her mother's pearls, rings, heavy gold bracelets, a pile of gold and diamonds that represented 46 years of my life, of our life. They were dumping it on the counter like so much scrap metal. The man behind the counter, an appraiser in a crisp suit, was examining the items one by one. Sylvia was tapping her foot, her arms crossed, agitated. Jenna was chewing her thumbnail, her eyes darting toward the door every time it opened. Then Jenna reached back into the bag. She pulled out the last item. My heart stopped. I would know it anywhere. It was a Rolex President, solid gold. I bought that watch for Patrick when he graduated with his MBA. I'd had the back engraved. To Patrick. Your future is what you build. Love, Dad. I remembered the weight of it in my hand when I bought it. I remembered the look on his face when I gave it to him. He'd actually cried. He'd hugged me and said, "I'll keep this forever, Dad. I'll pass it on to my son one day." And here was his wife Jenna sliding it across the counter to a pawnbroker as if it were nothing. The man picked it up. He looked at the engraving on the back. He looked up at Jenna. He must have said something because Jenna snapped at him. I couldn't hear the audio clearly, but her body language was sharp, angry. Just give me the money. The pawnbroker shrugged. He tapped a few numbers into a calculator. He wrote a figure on a piece of paper and slid it toward them. Sylvia looked at it and immediately violently shook her head. She was arguing, haggling. She pointed at the diamonds, at the watch. She was desperate. Jenna put her hand on Sylvia's arm, urging her to just take it. This wasn't paying off a credit card. This was scraping the bottom of the barrel. This was the cash for the loan sharks. This was the $100,000 Estelle had talked about. They were selling my gifts, my history, our children's inheritance to pay off criminals. The video ended with the man counting out thick stacks of cash. Sylvia and Jenna stuffed the money unceremoniously into the designer handbag, the only thing they hadn't sold, and rushed out of the store. I sat back. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I thought about that engraved watch. Your future is what you build. My son had built nothing. He had only learned how to tear things down, and his wife and my wife were his demolition crew. They were complicit. They were all in it together. This confirmed it. The $100,000 demand wasn't a random figure. It was a specific, urgent debt, and they were willing to liquidate our entire past to pay it. I felt a grim satisfaction. They were desperate. And desperate people make more mistakes. The phone buzzed. It was a text from Thorne. The accountants are done. Call me. The $5 million hole is confirmed. But Harris just followed Patrick. He's not with his wife. He's at a different location. And he's not alone. My phone was buzzing again. The text from Thorne. Harris just followed Patrick. He's at a different location. And he's not alone. A new link appeared. This one said, Live Feed. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then tapped it. My screen filled with a new video, this one live streamed from the investigator's car. The view was through a chain-link fence looking onto a vast, desolate parking lot behind a derelict warehouse. Weeds grew through cracks in the asphalt. It was the industrial wasteland down by the old rail yards. Patrick's car, his silver BMW, was parked alone in the middle of the lot. He was leaning against the hood, and even from this distance I could see he was terrified. He was rubbing his hands together, pacing in a small, tight circle. He looked like a cornered animal. I watched, holding my breath. A minute later, a black Escalade with tinted windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian rolled into the lot. It didn't drive fast. It cruised slow and menacing like a shark. It pulled up directly in front of Patrick's car, blocking any chance of escape. Patrick immediately put his hands up, a gesture of placation. I have it, I have it. I could barely hear his voice tinny through the investigator's microphone. The doors of the Escalade opened. 2 men got out. They were not bankers. One was huge, built like a refrigerator with a shaved head and a neck as thick as my thigh. The other was smaller, older, wearing an expensive-looking silk shirt that did nothing to hide the coiled, wiry tension in his body. He was the one in charge. He walked right up to Patrick, who visibly shrank. "You're late, Patrick." The smaller man's voice was surprisingly calm, which made it even more frightening. "We told you noon. What time is it, Leo?" The big man grunted. 2:30. "It's 2:30, the man in the silk shirt said, as if discussing the weather. "You're 2.5 hours late, and you're short." No, Patrick said, his voice cracking. He fumbled with a briefcase I hadn't noticed. I got most of it. It's 85,000. From my wife. She sold her jewelry. All of it. I'll have the rest by tomorrow, I swear." The man in the silk shirt just looked at him. He didn't blink. 85. You promised 100. As a down payment. On the $500,000 you owe me this week. I know. Just listen. Patrick pleaded, his voice desperate. I have a new plan. A better one. My father. The old man I told you about. He has millions in assets. Commercial real estate. We have a plan to get control of it. All of it. It's happening now. I can get you everything. Not just the $500,000. I can get you 10 million. 20. We just need a little more time. I watched my son standing in a deserted parking lot, trying to barter my entire life's work, my father's legacy, to a pair of violent criminals. The man in the silk shirt was silent for a long time. He tilted his head. Your father, the old builder, the one you were supposed to get the money from yesterday, the one who... What was it you said? He's a clueless old man, it's fine. Doesn't seem fine, Patrick. Seems to me. Your old man is smarter than you are. No, he's stubborn. But we're handling it. My mother, she's handling it. She's handling it. The man nodded. I don't care about your mother. I don't care about your father. I care about my money. He stepped closer, right into Patrick's personal space. You stole from your clients, Patrick. That's your business. But then you lost that stolen money to my associates. That makes it my business. I gave you a chance to make it right. Pay me back with interest. And you're late. And you're short. Please, Patrick whispered. He was crying now. Please, just a few more days. The bigger man, Leo, stepped forward. He said, please, and then with no warning, he shoved Patrick, hard, in the chest. My son flew backward, tripping over his own feet, and crashed onto the filthy asphalt. The briefcase flew open, scattering stacks of cash across the ground. I watched frozen in my chair in the luxury suite as my son lay on the ground, whimpering. The man in the silk shirt walked over. He didn't yell. He crouched down calmly so he was face to face with Patrick. He picked up one of the scattered bundles of money. You have 48 hours, Patrick, he said, his voice quiet, almost kind. Not for this. For everything. The full $500,000. Not your assets. Not your promises. My money. In my hand. 48 hours. He stood up. Because if you don't, he continued, brushing dust from his pants, I'm not just going to come for you. I'm going to come for your pretty wife, Jenna. And I'm going to come for your mother, Sylvia. He leaned in one last time. And just for fun, I'm going to come for your clueless old man, too. Do you understand me? Patrick, sobbing on the ground, nodded frantically. Yes. Yes. Okay. Please. The two men didn't bother picking up the rest of the cash. They just walked back to the Escalade, got in, and glided away, leaving my son alone, a pathetic, broken heap, surrounded by the money he had sold his mother's pearls to get. The video feed ended. I sat there staring at the blank screen of the phone for a long, long time. The image of my son Patrick crying on the asphalt. It should have broken my heart. And maybe it did. But it was overshadowed by a colder, harder feeling. Rage. He hadn't just been crying because he was scared. He had been bartering. He had offered me and my entire legacy to these criminals to save his own skin. I can get you 10 million, 20. 48 hours. That was his deadline. He was out of options. He had failed to get the cash from Sylvia's jewelry sale. He had failed to get the 100,000 from me. He was a cornered rat, and a cornered rat will do anything to escape. I thought about his words. My mother, she's handling it. They were working together. He was the one in debt, but she was the one trying to secure the assets. They were both coming for me. They needed my money, my signature, my control, and they needed it now. I looked at the clock. It was almost 5 p.m. They'd be desperate. Patrick would have gone home to Sylvia defeated, terrified. They would be scrambling, trying to figure out their next move. It was time to give them one. I took a deep breath. I thought about my father, Thomas. He was a lion. I thought about Estelle. She was a fortress. And I thought about Benjamin Foster, the clueless old man. It was time to play the part they had written for me. I dialed Sylvia's number from the encrypted phone. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was not the angry shriek from the car. It was tense, distracted, brittle. Hello, hello. I waited a beat. Then I let out a shaky breath, a small, pathetic sound. Sylvia. Ben. Her voice sharpened. It wasn't relief. It was opportunity. Ben, where are you? My God, we've been. Jenna said you were at Frank's. We called, he's been dead for 10 years. Ben, we thought. Where are you? I let the silence stretch. I made my voice crack. I got confused, Sylvia. I'm at a small hotel near the airport. I used my emergency credit card. I didn't have one. It was a lie to make me sound pathetic. Sylvia, I'm so tired. And I'm cold. A hotel? I heard muffled talking. She was covering the phone, whispering frantically to Patrick. I could almost hear his voice in the background. Is he okay? Does he know? Ask him about the money. She came back on the line, her voice dripping with a fake syrupy concern that made my skin crawl. Oh, Ben, darling, you must be exhausted. Why didn't you call? We were so worried. I was ashamed, I whispered. I let my voice break a little. You were right. I'm just an old man. I don't understand these things. I was stubborn. I'm so sorry, Sylvia. I'm scared. This was the bait. I heard a sharp intake of breath on her end. Oh, Ben, it's okay. It's okay. We were just upset. We can fix this. Patrick, I said, is he there? Is he okay? I was so worried about him. About the money. He's right here, Ben, she said, her voice bright and false. I heard a rustle, and then Patrick's voice, equally fake, equally relieved. Dad, are you okay? We were so worried. I'm so sorry, son, I whimpered. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. I want to help. I'll give you the money. The 100,000. Whatever you need. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. I just want to come home. Please, I just want this to be over. Please, Sylvia. Please come get me. I let the pathetic plea hang in the air. Silence. Then I heard it. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. It was Patrick. He wasn't crying. He wasn't worried. He let out a short, sharp whoop of victory. Yes, I heard him hiss. I told you, Mom. I told you he'd break. Sylvia got back on the phone. Her voice was shaking, but this time it was with suppressed triumph. Oh, Ben, thank God. Thank God you've come to your senses. Sure. We're so relieved. Of course you can come home. We love you. We were just trying to help you understand. I understand now, I whispered. I'll sign the papers for the investment. I'll sign. That's wonderful, Ben. That's just wonderful. Listen, she said, her voice becoming efficient, all business. We can't come get you right now. We have a meeting. But to make it all legal, for the transfer, so Patrick can get his money right away. Can you meet us tomorrow? Meet where? At our lawyer's office, she said. Mr. Graves, 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll sign the transfer papers. Just a simple formality. And then it's all over. Everything will go back to normal. We can be a family again. Our lawyer's office. Transfer papers. Everything will go back to normal. Yes, I said, my voice trembling with fake relief. Yes, okay. 10 o'clock, I'll be there. We're so proud of you, Ben, she said. You're doing the right thing. I hung up. I sat in the silent room. The mask of the clueless old man fell away. I looked at the phone in my hand. They hadn't just taken the bait. They had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. And tomorrow at 10 o'clock, I was going to reel them in. I put the phone down, the triumphant sound of Patrick's yes echoing in my ear. They thought they had me. They thought the old man was broken, scared, and crawling back to them, wallet in hand. They thought I was coming to surrender. I immediately dialed Thorne. He answered on the first ring. "Thorne? It's Ben. The trap is set." "Tell me," he said. "They took the bait, all of it. They want me at their lawyer's office tomorrow at 10 a.m. to sign the transfer papers. They think I'm coming to give them the 100,000. There was a pause. Not a long one, but a heavy one. "Whose office, Ben?" "A lawyer named Graves," I said. "Sylvia called him our lawyer, Graves and Associates." Another pause. This one was longer. "Robert Graves?" Thorne asked. His voice had lost its quick, professional clip. It was now slow, cautious. "That's the one," I said. "Do you know him?" "I know of him," Thorne said. "And Ben, that's a problem." My gut clenched. That same cold feeling I'd had in the car before Sylvia threw me out. "A problem? Why is he good?" "Oh, he's very good," Thorne said, his voice grim. "He's the best in the city at what he does. But what he does is not finance. Ben, why would they need Robert Graves to witness a simple wire transfer? Why bring in a lion to swat a fly?" I didn't understand. "What are you talking about? They need it legalized." I don't know." "No," Thorne said. "You don't. You don't bring in a $20,000 a day litigator to notarize a check. It doesn't make sense. Patrick is 5 days from an SEC investigation. He's 48 hours from having his knees broken by criminals. They aren't taking you to that office to ask you to sign. They're taking you there to guarantee it." A new terrifying thought began to form. What does Graves specialize in, Thorne?" "I'm looking at his firm's public profile right now," Thorne said. I heard the rapid, quiet clicking of a keyboard. "I need to be sure. Ben, this is... Wait, give me 30 minutes. I need to make some calls. Do not go anywhere. Do not talk to them again. I will call you back on this phone." The line went dead. 30 minutes. I stood up and walked to the window of the suite. A lion to swat a fly. What did that mean? What papers were they really going to make me sign? I thought back to Jenna's phone call. "We thought, where are you? We're so worried, and Sylvia on the call just now. Thank God you've come to your senses." They weren't just manipulating me. They were building a narrative. They were creating a story. The story of a confused, erratic 70-year-old man who had a little argument and just walked off. A man who thought his friend who'd been dead for 10 years was still alive. A man who was stubborn and sentimental. A man who was... The phone on the desk rang, making me jump. It was Thorne. It hadn't even been 20 minutes. I snatched it up. "Thorne," his voice was pure ice. "Ben, I was wrong." My heart hammered. "Wrong about what?" "He's not a lion," Thorne said. "He's a vulture. I just spoke to an old colleague at the Bar Association. I've seen his case history. Robert Graves, he is not a financial lawyer. He has zero specialty in wealth management. He's not a criminal lawyer. He's not a real estate lawyer." "Then what is he?" I demanded. "He's a probate litigator, Ben. He is the #1 most ruthless, most successful specialist in the state of Illinois for contested guardianships and involuntary competency hearings." I had to grip the desk to stay standing. The phone felt slippery in my hand. "Guardianship? You mean, like for old people, for people who are no longer capable of managing their own affairs?" "Ben," Thorne's voice was sharp, pulling me back from the shock. "He's the lawyer you hire when you want to force a relative into a home and take legal control of their entire estate. He's the man you hire when you want to prove in front of a judge that someone is senile, confused, paranoid, incompetent." The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. The fight, kicking me out without a phone or wallet. Jenna's call setting up my confusion about my dead friend, their worry. and my phone call just now. A confused, scared old man begging to come home, promising to sign whatever you need. My God, I whispered. They're not trying to convince me. They're trying to have me committed. It's worse, Ben, Thorne said, his voice urgent. Graves doesn't lose. He's notorious for using expert witnesses. Hired gun doctors who will show up and testify for a fee that a patient is a danger to himself or his finances. They're not just taking you to sign a transfer paper. They're taking you to an ambush. They will have a doctor there. They will have a notary. They will try to trick you into signing a voluntary conservatorship. And the moment you refuse, the moment you get angry, the moment you accuse them, they will use that, your paranoia, your agitation, as the primary evidence to file an emergency petition with a judge to have you declared incompetent before the end of the day. The full horrifying plan laid itself bare. They get control, not just of the 100,000, not just the 250. They get everything. They get my entire real estate portfolio. They'll leverage it, pay back the $5 million Patrick stole, pay off the loan sharks. And they would leave me, Benjamin Foster, locked in a nursing home, legally erased with my signature on a piece of paper that says I'm insane. They're trying to bury me alive, I said. Yes, Thorne replied. But they made one mistake. They thought you were a clueless old man. They didn't know you were Thomas Foster's son. And they damn well didn't know you were my client. 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be ready. We're not just going to stop them, Ben. We are going to dismantle them. I spent the last of my cash on a cab. I didn't wear the new clothes I had bought. I went back to the old stained slacks and the worn-out shirt I had been wearing for 3 days. I didn't shave. I splashed cold water on my face, but I didn't dry it, letting the dampness cling to my skin. I made sure to walk the 6 blocks to the cab stand in the morning chill. By the time I arrived at the downtown high-rise, I was the perfect picture of the man they wanted. A 70-year-old vagrant, shivering red-eyed and completely defeated. The building was all polished steel and silent, expensive glass. The lobby smelled like money. I shuffled my feet on the marble floor, just like I used to when I came in from a muddy construction site. The security guard at the front desk looked at me with open disdain, his eyes flicking to my dirty duffel bag. He probably assumed I was a delivery man who had wandered into the wrong building. I took the elevator up to the 27th floor. The doors opened onto a hushed, gray-carpeted reception area. Graves and Associates. I pushed the heavy glass door open. I could hear their voices before I saw them. They were in a large conference room just off the lobby, the door wide open. They were all there. Sylvia, Patrick, and Jenna. They were sitting around a massive dark wood table that looked like it had been carved from a single ancient tree. Sylvia saw me first. Her hand flew to her mouth. It was a perfect performance of shock and pity. "Oh, Ben, my God, look at you." She rushed toward me, her arms open, her expensive perfume choking me as she pulled me into a hug. Her body was tense. She felt cold as ice. "Oh, darling, you look terrible," she whispered, her voice thick with fake tears. "You're freezing. Where have you been? What happened to you?" Patrick and Jenna were right behind her, their faces arranged in identical masks of practiced concern. "Dad," Patrick said, his voice heavy with false emotion. He put a hand on my shoulder, his grip a little too tight. "Dad, we were so worried. We've been up all night." Jenna was hysterical. "Why didn't you just come home?" Jenna, right on cue, dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes with a tissue. "Thank God you're safe, Ben. We were so scared. We thought you were lost." Lost. That was the word. The word they had been practicing. The word they would use later in court. Lost. Confused. Senile. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands tremble. I looked around the room with vacant eyes. I'm sorry," I stammered, letting my voice shake. I got confused." I don't know, I just want this to be over. I, I'll sign the papers. I'll sign whatever you want. For Patrick. Of course, Ben. Of course. A new voice, smooth and confident as silk, cut through the family drama. A man in an immaculate dark gray three-piece suit stepped forward. He was tall, thin, and looked less like a lawyer and more like a high-end mortician. This had to be Robert Graves. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Foster," he said. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He simply gestured to the head of the table. "I'm Robert Graves. I'm just here to facilitate this transition for the family. I just want to sign the transfer," I said, looking at Patrick. "For the investment. The money." "Absolutely," Graves said, guiding me into the heavy leather chair. "And we will get to that. We will absolutely get to that. But first, given your recent episode, the family was quite rightly very concerned. They insisted we have someone here just to make sure you're comfortable, to ensure you fully understand the process. For your own protection, of course." I looked up at him, playing the part of the confused old man. "Protection, what? What do you mean I don't need protection?" Graves smiled. It was a thin reptilian smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a formality, Ben. A precaution." He gestured to another man who had been sitting so quietly in the corner of the room I hadn't even noticed him. He was older, with graying hair and a kind, sympathetic face. He had a leather briefcase balanced on his knees. "This strong," Graves said, his voice dripping with false reassurance, "is Dr. Peters. He's a specialist in geriatric cognitive health. He's just here to have a brief chat with you, to assess your condition, just to make sure you're, well, it's just a simple evaluation, Benjamin. Nothing to worry about." I looked at the doctor. I looked at Sylvia's nodding, concerned face. I looked at Patrick, who was vibrating with anticipation, practically bouncing his knee under the table. The trap was set. The vultures had gathered. And I was the bait. Graves slid a thick stack of documents across the polished table. The top page was marked with several bright yellow "Sign Here" tabs. He tapped the first one with a manicured finger. "Here we are, Ben. Just a simple authorization. This just gives Patrick the temporary power, a power of attorney, to manage your accounts. Just to help you while you're feeling under the weather. Just sign here, here, and here." Patrick pushed the stack closer to me, his hand resting near mine, as if he were a supportive son. "It's just to help me with the investment, Dad. Just like you promised. You're doing the right thing. We're all here for you." I sat there, my hands trembling. I made them tremble. I looked at the papers, letting my eyes unfocus slightly, as if I were struggling to read the text. It's a lot of pages," I said, my voice weak. "A lot of pages, just for a transfer." Graves let out a small, condescending chuckle. "It's just standard legal language, Ben. Boilerplate. Very common. You just need to sign at the bottom. We can read it all to you if you'd like, but it's very dry." No. I put my finger on the header of the first page. I pretended to trace the letters as if sounding them out for the first time. Petition. It says, petition for voluntary guardianship of the person and estate. I looked up. I let the confusion on my face look real, but I aimed it at them like a weapon. "Sylvia, this isn't a transfer paper. This says guardianship. That's what they did to my Uncle Frank when he got sick, when they put him in the home." The room went absolutely still. Patrick's supportive smile froze and shattered. Jenna, who had been looking at her phone, snapped her head up, her eyes wide. Sylvia's mask of concern faltered, revealing the pure, cold panic underneath. Graves was the first to recover. The mortician's smile snapped back into place. Ben, guardianship is just the legal term for this kind of high-value power of attorney. It's the same thing, a technicality. It just protects you. It protects the estate. It just lets Patrick help you. No, I said, my voice shaking with fake fear. No, it's not. I can read this part. It says here, hereby surrenders all financial and medical decision-making, permanently. Sylvia, permanently. This was the cue. The doctor sprang into action. Dr. Peters leaned forward, his kind, sympathetic face now looking grave and professional. Mr. Foster, Ben, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very rational concern. I was just speaking with Sylvia and Patrick about your recent episodes. Episodes, I said, looking around the room as if I'd missed something. I haven't had any episodes. Ben, darling, Sylvia jumped in her voice, breaking with a performance that would have won an award. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't remember, don't? That's the problem. You called Jenna's house yesterday. You thought Frank Peterson was alive. Ben, Frank has been dead for 10 years. She turned to the doctor, her eyes wide with rehearsed terror. You see, doctor, he's forgotten. He's completely forgotten. It's getting worse. Dr. Peters nodded grimly, making a note on a legal pad. A classic sign of significant cognitive decline, I'm afraid. Anterograde amnesia. He's creating false memories to cover the gaps. And the paranoia. Patrick added, his voice low, as if it pained him to say it. He looked at the doctor with such sincerity, such pain. Doctor, he's convinced we're all trying to steal from him. He had this delusion that I needed money for some criminal enterprise. He said I was, I don't know, in trouble. He accused me. Dr. Peters wrote this down, tisk-tisking softly. Ah, yes. Delusions of persecution. Very common in this stage. He's created a narrative in which his loving, supportive family members are antagonists. He sees their attempts to help, like this very necessary guardianship, as an attack. It's a textbook case. Graves leaned in for the kill. And doctor, his refusal to provide financial support, the $100,000, even though it was to help his only son. Dr. Peters nodded gravely, closing his notepad. He looked at me with profound pity. That Mr. Graves is the most troubling sign of all. A complete failure of executive function. A catastrophic lapse in judgment. Refusing to help his son, who he clearly loves for reasons based in paranoia. It's clear proof that Mr. Foster is no longer capable of making rational financial decisions. He is, in my professional opinion, a clear and present danger to himself and to his own estate. They had built the perfect cage. Every word I said, every action I took was now proof of my insanity. My refusal to be robbed was a catastrophic lapse in judgment. My anger was paranoia. My confusion was amnesia. I looked at the paper. I looked at their eager, predatory faces. Sylvia, the grieving wife. Patrick, the burdened son. Jenna, the worried daughter. And Graves and Peters, the experts here to save me from myself. So, I said, my voice small, if I don't sign this, you'll just tell a judge I'm crazy. Graves smiled that thin, oily smile again. Ben, no one is using the word crazy. We are using the word incapable. This is not a punishment. This is a protection. If you don't sign yes, we will be forced to present Dr. Peters' professional assessment to a judge. For your own good. We just want what's best for you. What's best for me? I repeated, my voice still small. I looked down at the signature line. I picked up the heavy, expensive pen they had placed in front of me. I could feel all their eyes on me. I could feel their collective sigh of relief as I lifted the pen. I held it over the paper. Patrick leaned in closer, his eyes fixed on the tip of the pen. Then I very deliberately set the pen down on the table. I looked up. I looked right at Patrick, and I stopped shaking. The tremor in my voice, the fear in my eyes, it all vanished. "You really think," I said, my voice now low, clear and cold as steel, "that I am a clueless old man, don't you?" The change in the room was electric. Sylvia's concerned expression froze. Jenna's hand stopped halfway to her face. Patrick's jaw dropped. "Dad," Patrick said, his voice confused. What are you doing? Just sign the paper. Stop this." "Stop what?" I asked. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "Stop playing your part. You all did so well. The performance was excellent. Sylvia, the tears, a masterstroke. Jenna, the breathless panic on the phone, inspired. And Dr. Peters." I looked at the doctor in the corner. "A wonderful understated performance. Textbook case. A lovely touch." Graves was the first to react. "Mr. Foster, if you are feeling agitated, perhaps we should take a break." "I am not agitated, Mr. Graves," I said, turning my gaze to him. "I am enlightened, and I am not signing your fraudulent guardianship petition." Patrick shot to his feet. The chair screeched backward on the floor. His mask of concern didn't just slip, it evaporated. His face was purple with rage. "Sign it, old man," he roared, slamming his fist on the table. "Just sign the damn paper. You don't know what you're doing. You're ruining everything." "On the contrary, Patrick," I said calmly. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what you're doing. I know about the 48-hour deadline. I know about the loan sharks. I know about the meeting in the parking lot. I know about the men named Leo and the one in the silk shirt." The color drained from Patrick's face. He looked at Sylvia, who looked like she had just seen a ghost. How could you?" he stammered. "You see," I continued, "while you were all busy building this little stage play, setting me up as an incompetent fool, I was busy too. I've seen the videos of your wife and your mother selling my anniversary gifts at a pawn shop. I've seen the footage of you, Patrick, groveling on the asphalt, begging for your life, crying. You were spying on me," he whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "You threw me out of a car with no phone and no money," I said, my voice rising. "You abandoned me. Did you think I was just going to sit on the curb and wait to die? My father was a lion. You should have remembered that." You... Patrick was sputtering, his mind racing, trying to catch up. You bastard! You did this. You ruined it. I needed that money. You don't understand what you've done." "Oh, I think I do," I said. "You needed the 100,000 to pay off your criminal friends. You needed the 250,000 to... what run? A little nest egg for you and your mother, and you needed me, committed, so you could get your hands on my real estate." "Yes," he screamed. His composure was completely gone. He was a desperate, terrified child in a 42-year-old's body. "Yes, you're right, but you don't know the reason. I know the reason, Patrick. I know about the gambling. I know about the offshore accounts. I know you're in a hole." "A hole?" He laughed, a wild, hysterical sound that was half sob. "A hole? You think this is about a gambling debt? You really are a clueless old man." He grabbed his hair with both hands. "This isn't about my money. It's about their money, the client's money. I didn't just lose Dad, I stole. I stole from them. It's gone." He was sobbing now. Great racking sobs. "It's gone. $5 million I took it. I was just borrowing it to make a quick trade, to fix the gambling losses. But the trade went bad. It's all gone. And the audit? The audit is in 5 days. I have to put it back. I have to. Or I'm going to prison for 30 years. Don't you see I have to put it back? He sank into his chair, his head hitting the table with a dull thud. I have to put it back. The room was silent. Sylvia was ashen, staring at her son. Jenna was frozen in horror. Graves and Dr. Peters looked like they wanted to be anywhere else on earth. The confession hung in the air, raw and undeniable. It wasn't about gambling. It wasn't about a loan shark. It was embezzlement. $5 million. Sylvia, my wife, did not rush to comfort her sobbing son. She stood up. Her face was not the face of a grieving mother. It was the face of a general whose carefully planned attack had just been revealed. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying cold fury. "Ben, please," she said, her voice low and pleading. But it wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a plea for me to join the conspiracy. You see what he's been going through. He made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. But he's our son." She walked toward me, her hands outstretched. This is why we had to. This is why we needed the guardianship. Not to hurt you, but to save him. He's going to prison, Ben. Don't you understand? Your son is going to prison for 30 years unless we fix this. We can still fix this. We can get the money. We can mortgage the properties. You can make this go away. I looked at her. At my wife of 46 years. She was asking me to become an accessory to a $5 million felony, to liquidate my entire life's work, to cover up a crime, to erase a consequence. Save him, Sylvia, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Or save yourselves from the embarrassment, from the lifestyle you'd have to give up. You don't understand, Patrick suddenly yelled from the table. He lifted his head, his face pale and slick with tears. He looked at his mother with a wild, crazed laugh. Save me, you. You think this is about saving me? You don't even get it, do you, Mom? Sylvia looked confused. Patrick, what are you talking about? We'll get the money. We'll pay it back before the audit. Pay it back. Patrick laughed again, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that sent a chill down my spine. He doesn't want the $5 million back. He told me in the parking lot. I stared at him. What are you talking about? The man in the silk shirt. The criminal you owe. He doesn't care about the $5 million. Patrick was almost giddy now, high on his own terror. He was impressed. Graves. The lawyer was slowly backing toward the door. Dr. Peters, I think we should... Sit down, I roared, and to my surprise they both froze. I turned back to Patrick. What did you say? He said anyone stupid enough to steal $5 million and lose it all was a liability. He was going to kill me, Patrick whispered. But then I told him about you. Me? Yes, you. The clueless old man. I told him my father had a massive real estate company. Clean. Decades of clean history. I told him you were old, that you were losing it, that we were about to take control. Patrick looked at me, his eyes shining with a sickening, twisted pride. And he smiled, Dad. The guy in the silk shirt. He smiled. He said a man who steals $5 million is stupid. But a man who has access to a $30 million commercial real estate portfolio, that man isn't a liability. That man is an opportunity. The final horrifying piece of the puzzle slammed into place. He doesn't want the $5 million back, I said, realizing the truth. No, Patrick yelled. He wants a service. He wants a laundromat. He He's got $20 million in dirty cash, Dad. 20 million, and he needs it to be clean. He gave me a choice. Go to prison for the embezzlement, or use your company, your clean, respected, clueless old man company, to wash it for him. He said if I do it, he'll forget the 5 million. He'll even give me a cut. There it was. The real plan. Not to pay back a debt. Not to get a loan. It was to get legal, ironclad control of my entire company, my signature, my name. They needed the guardianship so Patrick could legally sign away my properties, buy fake assets, move ghost money, and turn the Foster construction legacy into a front for organized crime. I looked at Sylvia. Her face was chalk white. She wasn't shocked. She was terrified because the plan had been exposed. "And you," I said to her, my voice shaking. You knew this, or you knew about the laundering." Sylvia just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. "It was her idea," Patrick suddenly screamed, pointing at his mother. "The guardianship, it was her idea. When I told her the new plan, she was the one who said, 'He'll never agree to it. We have to make him agree.' She was the one who called Graves. She was the one who told me to get a doctor. She was the mastermind. My son was a thief and a coward, but my wife, Sylvia, she was the architect. She was willing to sacrifice me, to have me locked away, declared insane, to turn my entire life's work, my father's name, into a criminal enterprise, all to save her precious, worthless son. I looked at them, the two people I had spent my life protecting, the two people who were now trying to bury me alive. I just stared at them. My son, a blubbering, terrified thief. My wife, a cold, calculating mastermind. My daughter-in-law, a useless accomplice. And their hired guns, the slick lawyer and the fake doctor, looking at the door like they wanted to bolt. And I did something I hadn't done in months. I laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a deep, loud, genuine laugh that came from my gut. It was the laugh of a man who had just seen the punchline to the cruelest joke in the world. It echoed in the silent, expensive conference room. Sylvia's head snapped up. What's so funny? Ben, stop it. This is serious." "Oh, it's serious, Sylvia," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "It's the most serious thing in the world. And you almost had me. The plan, it was perfect. The fake confusion, the doctor, the guardianship petition, a masterpiece of betrayal. You thought of everything." I stood up from my chair, my voice now calm and steady. "A perfect plan. There's only one problem." Patrick looked up, his face a mess of tears and snot. What problem?" "The problem," I said, looking right at him, "is that you're right. I am a clueless old man. But my father was a lion, and he taught me to always get a second opinion on a bad foundation." As if on cue, the heavy mahogany conference room doors swung open with a whoosh. Sylvia, Patrick, and Graves all flinched, spinning around. A man stood in the doorway. He was not wearing a uniform. He was wearing a $12,000 suit, and his face was carved from granite. It was Mr. Thorne. He took one step into the room, his eyes scanning every person, cataloging their guilt. "The problem," Thorne said, his voice filling the room with an authority that Graves could only dream of, "is that Mr. Foster isn't incompetent at all. In fact, his mind is sharper than any of ours." Patrick scrambled to his feet. Who the hell are you? This is a private meeting. Get out." "I am Mr. Foster's legal counsel," Thorne said, ignoring Patrick and looking directly at Graves. "And I'm not alone." Thorne stepped aside, and through the door walked two uniformed Chicago police officers. Their hands were resting casually on their belts, their expressions bored as if they were just stopping by for coffee. But they weren't the ones who scared them. The man who followed them in was the one. He was tall, impeccably dressed in his late 60s with a face that radiated pure, unfiltered intelligence and authority. "Dr. Peters," Thorne said, gesturing to the fake doctor who was now trying to blend into the wallpaper. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Aris Thorne. He's my brother. He's also the chief of psychiatry at St. Jude's Hospital and the foremost expert on geriatric cognitive assessment in this state. He'd love to see your credentials." The color drained from Dr. Peters' face. He looked at Graves. He looked at the police. He looked at me. And he knew. The trap wasn't for me. It was for them. I watched as Dr. Peters tried to make himself small. He physically shrank in his chair, his fake sympathetic expression melting into one of pure, unadulterated panic. Dr. Aris Thorne. Thorne's brother walked over to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who held all the cards. "Dr. Peters," Aris said, his voice smooth and dangerously calm. "I find your assessment fascinating. A textbook case. You see, I am, the chief of psychiatry at St. Jude's Hospital. I have written several of the textbooks you're referring to. And in all my years, I have never heard of you. What medical school did you graduate from?" I... Peters stammered, his eyes darting frantically to Graves. This is a confidential patient evaluation. I will not be interrogated." "You're not his doctor," Aris said flatly. "You're an actor. I ran your name. You're listed with central casting." "I demand you remove this man." The older of the two police officers who had been standing silently by the door took one step forward. He ignored Aris. He looked directly at Graves. "Are you Robert Graves?" "Yes, I am, and I demand." "You're under arrest," the officer said, his voice flat. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elder abuse, and unlawful imprisonment." The second officer moved toward the fake doctor, who looked like he was about to faint. "You too, doctor. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." As the officers began to cuff a sputtering Graves and a whimpering Peters, the room finally broke. Jenna let out a small, terrified scream. Sylvia shot to her feet, her face a mask of disbelief. "What is this, Ben? Tell them to stop. This is all... It's a misunderstanding." Patrick was shaking his eyes wide with terror. You called the cops. You're sending me to jail after I told you the truth." "Silence," Mr. Thorne commanded. His voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "My client called no one. I called them. The moment your attorney, Mr. Graves, was confirmed to be a specialist in fraudulent conservatorships." Thorne walked to the table and calmly opened his leather briefcase. He turned to the officers. "Officers, you may want to wait by the door. The charges are about to get significantly more severe." He turned back to face Sylvia and Patrick. They were trapped. "Sylvia," Thorne began, his voice polite, "you and I have not had the pleasure of meeting, but I've been reviewing your recent financial activities with great interest." He pulled a single sheet of paper from a folder. "This is a bank record. It shows that at 10:45 a.m. on the day my client was abandoned on a highway, less than 10 minutes after he was abandoned, you attempted an illegal wire transfer of $250,000 from a joint brokerage account." Sylvia recoiled as if he'd thrown water on her. That was our money. I was consolidating accounts for safety." "Consolidating?" Thorne raised a single skeptical eyebrow. "Into a brand new LLC PF Holdings registered just 3 days ago to your son that Mrs. Foster is not consolidation. That is the legal definition of fraud." He then turned his full attention to Patrick, who looked like he was about to be sick. "And you, Patrick, you've been even busier." He pulled a small digital tablet from his briefcase and tapped the screen. My son's voice, tinny and terrified, suddenly filled the room. I can get you 10 million, 20. My father, he's a clueless old man. Patrick's face went white. And this, Thorne continued, turning the tablet around for all of us to see, is the live video feed from my investigator's dashboard camera yesterday. We all watched the scene. The black Escalade, the man in the silk shirt, the shove, Patrick, my son, crying on the filthy asphalt. This is you, is it not, meeting with known associates of the Antonelli crime syndicate, offering my client's entire real estate portfolio as a front for a $20 million money laundering operation. Thorne put the tablet down. You weren't trying to save your father's legacy, Patrick. You were selling it to criminals. This was my moment. I stood up slowly. I was no longer the shivering old man. I was Thomas Foster's son. I looked at Sylvia. Her face was no longer pale. It was dark red, with a sputtering, silent rage. You did this? She whispered, her voice venomous. You'd rather see your own son go to prison than help him. Help him, I said. My voice was quiet, but it dominated the room. You call this help? You call destroying my name, my reputation, my freedom? Help. I looked at Patrick. You told those thugs I was a clueless old man. You were half right. I was clueless. I was clueless about who my wife was, and I was clueless about who my son had become. I walked over to Thorne, who handed me a new set of documents. Sylvia, I said, when I got out of that car, I didn't just feel cold. I felt free. Free to finally see the truth. So the first thing I did, the very first call I made, was to have Mr. Thorne freeze everything, every joint account, every credit line, every single asset. You have nothing. You can't, she shrieked, finally finding her voice. The house, our home. It's in my name, too. You can't take my home. I smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a builder who has just checked the foundation and found it solid. No, Sylvia, you're wrong. The house, the cars, the lake house, they aren't in our names. I put them into an irrevocable trust 30 years ago. My father taught me to always protect the foundation from rot. And guess who the sole, incontestable trustee is? I tapped my own chest. This, I said, sliding the final document across the polished table toward her. It landed with a soft final sound. This is not an authorization. This is a 3-day eviction notice. Get out of my house. Patrick just stared at Thorne, his mouth half open. Sylvia looked from Thorne to me and then to her son. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian fear. The FBI, she whispered. You called the feds on your own son, Ben. What kind of monster are you? A monster, I asked. I felt strangely calm. You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away so you could turn my company into a criminal laundromat. You threw me out of your car without a dollar to my name. And I'm the monster. Patrick shook his head, a wild, terrified look in his eyes. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the door. You idiot, he hissed at his mother. The feds. You don't understand. These aren't just... They're the Antonelli crew. You've killed us. You've killed us all. Actually, Patrick, Thorne said, looking at his watch as if he were waiting for a train. You have it backward. We just saved you. The Antonelli crew is, shall we say, otherwise occupied. The FBI was very grateful for the detailed information on their operations. They've been trying to get inside that organization for years. Thorne smiled. And as for your testimony... The conference room doors opened again. They didn't swing open this time. They were pushed open firmly by two men and a woman in dark blue suits, guns holstered at their hips, FBI point badges clipped to their belts. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at Thorne. Their eyes were locked on my family. Patrick Foster. Sylvia Foster, the lead agent, a tall woman with zero emotion in her face, said, "It was not a question." Sylvia let out a sound. A high, thin wail that was part scream, part sob. "No, no, Ben, please. He's your son. You can't let them do this to him. Tell them it's a mistake, a family argument." She lunged toward me, her hands like claws trying to grab my shirt to shake me to appeal to the clueless old man she thought was still in there. A second agent stepped in front of her, blocking her path with his body. "Ma'am, you need to calm down." You bastard!" she shrieked at me, her face contorted. "You did this, you monster! Sylvia Foster," the lead agent said, her voice bored. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering." She nodded to the second agent who pulled Sylvia's arms behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was sharp, metallic, and final. The third agent moved to Patrick. My son didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just stood there, his body limp, his eyes completely hollow. He looked at me as they cuffed him. "Clueless old man," he whispered, a broken sound. "My God." Jenna, my daughter-in-law, who had been frozen in the corner the entire time just watching her life implode. Her eyes rolled back into her head. She made a small gasp and then crumpled sideways out of her chair, fainting onto the expensive Persian carpet. Nobody even looked down. The agents led them out. Patrick first, then Sylvia, who was no longer screaming, just weeping these horrible, gulping sobs. "My friends, my life, my reputation, it's all over." The room was suddenly empty. Graves and the fake doctor were gone, taken by the local police. My family was gone, taken by the feds. It was just me, Thorne, his brother Eris, and Jenna unconscious on the floor. Eris knelt, checked her pulse. "She'll be fine. She just fainted." Thorne closed his briefcase. "Well, Benjamin, that is that." I just nodded my legs, feeling weak. I had won. I had protected my father's legacy, and I had just sent my wife and son to prison. The months that followed were a blur of headlines and lawyers. "Foster family feud," one paper blared. "CEO son and wife arrested in multi-million-dollar laundering scheme." My face was everywhere. I was the victim, the patriarch who had been betrayed. I holed up in the Cypress Club, letting Thorne handle the media. I had to testify. It was the hardest day of my life. I sat in a federal courtroom under oath, and I told the truth. I told them about the car, about the phone, about the guardianship plot. I played the audio from the investigator's car, the one of Patrick crying on the asphalt. I told them everything. Sylvia's defense was predictable. She lied. She sat on the stand and wept, claiming I was the monster, a vindictive, controlling old man. She claimed I had framed them, that I was the one working with criminals, and when they threatened to expose me, I had them arrested. She said I was senile paranoid. She was, as Estelle had warned, a magnificent actress. But then, Patrick took the stand. He was thinner. His eyes were clear. The arrogance was gone. He was facing 30 years. His lawyer had cut a deal. Testify against everyone. His criminal associates, his co-conspirators, in exchange for a reduced sentence. And he did. "Were you afraid of your father, Mr. Foster?" the prosecutor asked. Patrick looked at me sitting in the front row. Then he looked at his mother. "No," he said, his voice clear. "I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of her." He pointed at Sylvia. The courtroom gasped. She was the one," Patrick said, his voice gaining strength. "When I told her, when I confessed about the embezzlement, I was panicking. I I wanted to run, but she she got calm. She said, "Stop crying. We just have to control your father. He's old. He's sentimental. It will be easy." The lawyer, Graves, the fake doctor. That was all her idea. I just wanted to cover the money. She wanted the empire. It was the final ugly betrayal. The son to save himself exposing the mother who had tried to save him. I watched Sylvia's face collapse. It was over. It was all finally over. Patrick's testimony sealed their fate. The trial was quick. He had confessed to the $5 million embezzlement. Sylvia, my wife, was found guilty as the architect of the guardianship fraud and the money laundering conspiracy. The judge was not kind. He looked at Sylvia and called her a void of familial loyalty. Patrick for his cooperation against the Antonelli crew, and his testimony received 20 years. He will be eligible for parole in 15. Sylvia, she received the same. 20 years. Jenna, my daughter-in-law, filed for divorce the day they were arrested. She tried to claim half of Patrick's assets, but there were no assets. There was only debt. And the irrevocable trust my father had inspired me to build, the one that held the house and all the real money, it was ironclad. She couldn't touch it. She walked away with nothing. The first thing I did was sell the house. I couldn't stand to set foot in it again. I sold the Mercedes. I sold all the furniture, all the trappings of a life that had turned out to be a lie. I liquidated the assets just as Sylvia had always wanted me to. But the money was mine. I had lunch with Estelle Wallace. We sat in her garden. "So, Benjamin," she said, sipping her tea, "you are a very wealthy, very single man. What will you do now? Buy an island?" I thought about my father, Thomas, the lion. I thought about how he had built his company on his word. "I'm going to build something," I said, "something that lasts." I took the millions I had recovered and I started the Foster Foundation. Estelle, with a dry laugh, agreed to join the board of directors. Our mission is simple. We provide free legal counsel and financial protection for the elderly. We are a shield for people who are being abused by their own families. We hunt the Robert Graveses of the world. We protect the clueless old men. 5 years passed. I am 75 years old now. I live in a clean, bright condominium downtown. I don't own a fancy car. I walk. I run the foundation. I am at peace. Last week, I drove to the state penitentiary. I went to visit my son. Patrick was different. The arrogance, the weakness, the panic, it was all gone. Prison had burned it away. He was thinner, quieter. The boy was gone and a man was sitting there. We sat at the small table, a piece of thick glass between us. He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know it doesn't mean anything, but I am sorry for the money. For what I did to you. For Mom. For everything." I looked at my son. My son the thief, my son the convict. I nodded slowly. "I know you are Patrick." I stood up. It was time to leave. "Dad, wait," he called out, his voice small. Will you come back?" I stopped. I looked back at him, at the man he was slowly becoming, not the spoiled boy he had been. "You have 15 years left, Patrick," I said. 15 years to learn how to be a man. My father's grandson. We'll see." I turned and I walked away. I walked past the guards, through the heavy buzzing gates, and out into the bright afternoon sun. And for the first time since Sylvia Foster threw me from that car, I was truly, completely free. If you are listening to this story, If you are perhaps an older parent and you feel that your children are starting to see you not as a person, but as a bank account or as an obstacle, I want you to hear me. Elder financial abuse is real. It is quiet. It is cruel, and it happens in the families that look the most perfect from the outside. They will count on your love. They will count on your silence. They will call you confused or paranoid or clueless. Do not let them. Do not mistake your kindness for weakness. My father taught me to always protect the foundation of the house. You are your own foundation. Sometimes setting a boundary isn't an act of revenge. It is an act of survival. Blood is not an excuse for betrayal, and love is not a blank check for abuse. Did you like this story? Please tell me what city you are listening from in the comments. Your support helps me bring more stories like this. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. With love and respect.